Adam Green here with No More News. It's April 14th, 2019, and I want to talk about this latest clip that's been going around the internet from the CBS show The Good Fight. So this is mainstream media, CBS, cable television show inciting violence against white people. The Good Fight is the show, and the episode is called The One with Luca's Literal Good Fight Against the Nazis. The show is called The One Where a Nazi Gets Punched. Let's play the clip and discuss afterwards. These are supposed to be the yellow vest that's been going on in France. That was supposed to be Richard Spencer.
Is it all right to hit a Nazi unprovoked? I was always taught to never throw the first punch, never instigate, defend, but don't attack. But then I saw a video of the white nationalist Richard Spencer being punched in the face during an interview, and I realized Spencer was in a pressed suit, wearing a tie, being interviewed like his opinion mattered, like he should be considered part of the conversation, like neo-Nazism was just one political point of view. And then I realized there's no better way to show some speech is not equal. Some speech requires a more visceral response. It's like Overton's window. That's the term from which ideas are tolerated in public discourse. Well, Overton's window doesn't mean shit unless it comes with some enforcement. So yeah, this is enforcement. It's time to punch a few Nazis.
So much stuff to break down. I could probably talk an hour just about this. There was the hearing the other day, that anti-white nationalist hearing in Congress, where it seemed like they were declaring war on white people, and then now we have this. So does this give me the right to go around and anybody I call a Nazi, I'm justified in assaulting them and punching them? Or communists and socialists killed a lot of people too. There was a lot of bad stuff with that. Do I get to go around and hurt anybody that I think is a socialist? We see these Antifa and these rallies, anti-Trump rallies. People say Nazi scum off our streets. That's the chant that they do. So they easily label, just throw out Nazi to anybody that they disagree with, anybody that's just right of center a little bit. And then now they're putting out the moving the Overton window. Another way I've been describing it lately. They're moving the Overton window, and now he's changing it so that Richard Spencer or anybody like him, he calls it a big interview out in the street. Another person says he was at a rally. He was at Trump's inauguration, just talking to somebody probably with a cell phone that asked him a few questions. It's not a big interview, and he just says, you're not allowed to talk, we're going to hit you. That's the new Overton window. And this is mainstream media on cable television, clearly inciting violence, which is like the only limit of the First Amendment, of freedom of speech, that they're clearly violating. Imagine this, just replace this with like a show with a white guy talking about causing harm to any other group. It would be just unheard of. You would never even see it. It's an impossible hypothetical. But, you could swap out any term for any term, and this would be impossible. But white people, it's only okay it's the trendy thing to be anti-white. There's an anti-white agenda clearly going on. I've been saying it for a while now. It's become so apparent and now validated with stuff like this out of mainstream media. So here is Reason. Reason did a little take on this when it happened about Richard Spencer being hit, and they did some interviews and listen to what people are saying. It's justified in so many people's heads. Political violence.
Is it okay to punch a Nazi?
I mean, we did go to war against them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This week's top story. If you see a Nazi, punch a Nazi.
Liberals should not be raving about this.
The new segment we like to call up a Nazi.
My 90-year-old uncle, if he was alive, would have punched that son of a bitch in the face, and I would have had his back.
But the question was never really just about Nazis. It was about the acceptability of political violence. And in the following year, the question came up again and again as several high-profile political protests turned violent, including one on the campus of UC Berkeley. We visited Berkeley about a year after that protest turned riot to ask students.
So they're allowed to burn flags, that's okay, but just talking and being white now is the grounds to be punched, essentially, with these people. And, you've already lost the argument when you start calling people names. You start throwing out ad hominems and attacking them personally. that's when you lose the argument. When you just skip that and go right past that to calling names and then assaulting people, that's when you're really on the losing side of the argument.
Whether punching Nazis or other deplorables is ever okay.
They want to punch the Nazi. Not going to judge.
It depends on what you define as a Nazi.
The people whose words create a culture that sort of ratifies violence against a certain group are punchable.
So I want to punch you. You're ratifying violence against a certain group. I don't see Richard Spencer calling for violence against anybody. If he does, I've never seen the clip. I've seen a lot of attacks on him in the mainstream media, but I haven't seen any calls for violence like I see on mainstream media and from this little Berkeley dork.
On February 1st, 2017, the nation watched the University of California, Berkeley burn as masked members of the far-left group Antifa lit fires, threw safety barriers through store windows, physically attacked people, and threw rocks at the police. The protests turned riots were sparked by the arrival of right-wing provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos, invited to campus by a conservative student group.
So, a Jewish Zionist is this Nazi that all Antifa is protesting against. This weird dialectic that Ben Shapiro and Milo are Nazis, are anti-Semitic Nazis, two hardcore Jewish Zionists.
President Trump helped ignite the controversy by tweeting a threat to pull federal funding from Berkeley. Protests continued throughout the rest of the year as more conservative speakers were drawn to the Berkeley campus. The students
Gavin McInnes, too, another worked for Rebel Media, a Zionist, proud Zionist in his own words.
We talked to said that the violence was carried out almost entirely by outsiders. Most of the students we spoke to condemned the group and its tactics, but they were also reluctant to condemn political violence altogether.
I personally wouldn't throw a stone through a window, but I would never criticize the psyche of someone who does.
I think it's hard for there to be very big change without some sort of violent aspect to it.
This is what these cultural Marxist professors are teaching our youth now. Chaos, revolution, riots, violence, hate speech, these hate speech Orwellian terms. This is sick stuff. Listen to these kids. They're all so brainwashed.
Whether that's property destruction or human life, which is like the sad reality that we live in.
Speech can be considered violence. Inviting people like Milo Yiannopoulos creates an unsafe environment for the people that he is speaking against. Property damage is absolutely justifiable. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that riots are the language of the voiceless.
To kind of harken back to what MLK said, a way for the unheard to make their voices amplified.
A riot is the language of the unheard.
That famous quote has been widely misinterpreted. King wasn't condoning riots. He was saying that in response to racial oppression, it was understandable though counterproductive, and that nonviolent protest is the only path to social change.
I think for the Negro to turn to violence would be both impractical and immoral.
If we say that it's okay to punch a Nazi, do we risk that umbrella of who is a Nazi becoming a little too large?
No.
Completely illogical. They call everybody Nazi. Trump is literally Hitler. That's what they love to say. You're literally Hitler. I get called a Nazi all the time. So is that I'm just fair game to get punched, even though I say I reject all these false labels they try to put on people? So now here is a little TRT World, another YouTube video that came out justifying the attack and the violence.
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
A white supremacist was punched in the face during a protest over Donald Trump's inauguration in Washington.
And then all these joke tweets, people like, oh, that Nazi that got punched in the head, that wasn't a punch, that was an alternative hug. There, fixed it. So
in DC. Now the internet is asking, is it okay?
You voted for a guy who said, quote, punch them in the face, I'll pay your legal fees, and then got mad that someone punched an actual Nazi. Well, that's a good point. Trump did say that. That one's actually kind of fair, but still, that wasn't a Nazi that Trump was telling you to punch.
It's okay to punch a Nazi. The moral conundrum arose when Richard Spencer, the Trump-supporting poster boy of the alt-right, was physically assaulted by an anti-fascist protester. This led to people asking, who gets to define what a Nazi is? and whether or not meeting a Nazi sanctions a physical response.
See that? Now, if I think you're a Nazi, I can hit you. So you can just run around, call people Nazis, and then justify violence against him. They don't see how dangerous this is. If you can't respond with logic and arguments and have a reasonable debate, you just have to throw out ad hominems and commit assault and violence. And that we're asking, like, is this okay? Is this a conundrum? No, it's not. This is the Overton window being shifted to create civil war and conflict and division and violence. Just so they can crack down more. This is planned.
People argued that Spencer's political positions justified him being punched in the face. So justified, in fact, that some people set the attack to music. Others weighed in from a more academic perspective, using the history of fascism and the anti-fascist movement as a way of explaining the effectiveness of physically confronting fascism.
Genocide. Does Richard Spencer call for genocide? I'm not a fan of Richard Spencer. I don't watch him, but I've seen the hit pieces on him. I've seen a lot of people talk trash about him. I know a lot of people don't like him even. He's not even really that popular. He's just propped up by the media. But I don't think he's calling for genocide. And not everything can be up for the debate. So they say, oh, we don't debate that you want to have genocide, even though he doesn't. So they don't want to debate, and they mischaracterize and misrepresent the other side of the argument. Common strategy.
According to them, denying racists the space to air their views is a crucial component of the anti-fascist movement. Following the incident, Spencer himself said the attacks had led him to think twice before appearing in public, which people said supported the theory that physical attacks on racists hampered their ability to organize politically.
He goes through the rest of that video basically justifying that it's all okay. So now here's another attack. This is New York Post making a cool video about how awesome it is that these people organized to punch this Nazi. And this guy's probably mentally ill. I don't know the full story on this, but still, it's the promotion of it, the making it trendy, the making it cool, and then now it's getting more normalized. We're being assimilated to this all over the mainstream media. Let's see if we can show you the punch.
They deserve the welfare. No, it's fine. Oh!
So he's having a conversation and then just punched, and New York Post thinks it's a great thing. Now here is Netflix. This is a guy on Netflix who talks about the Richard Spencer thing also. And yes, he says it's justified. So everybody wants violence with people that they disagree with.
I'm actually a gay comedian. Sorry, nobody. That white supremacist is always in the news, that guy, Richard Spencer. I'd never heard of this guy until he got punched at a rally. And people were debating it on Twitter. They were like, is it justified? Somebody came up to me. They were like, do you think that's justified? And I said, well, let me tell you this. I have been punched at a Pizza Hut lunch buffet. And that was justified.
Not really funny, and basically just making some non sequitur argument that it's okay to attack people. And I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm going to do another video about Alex Jones and his take on punching a Nazi because he's a hypocrite, so that'll be out soon. But thanks for watching, guys. It's scary. This anti-white agenda is becoming more and more apparent. They're not hiding it anymore. And it's getting scary. It's getting scary. Adam Green with No More News. Check out nomorenews.org. Like, share, subscribe. And make sure that let it be known everywhere that political violence is never okay. If somebody does something illegal, Richard Spencer does something bad, if a Nazi out there calls for violence or discriminates or persecutes or harms or violence, let them have a trial, a fair trial of their peers. Let it go through the court system. Let them be punished by the law. You don't take law into your own hands and punch whoever you think is a Nazi, whoever you want to call a Nazi. That is completely absurd. The fact that everybody's talking about it like it's even a question is just a sad state of affairs. That's all, guys. See you in the next video.